Welcome to the Focused Fundraiser, where we discuss how to focus on the right fundraising practices, because we believe that doing more shouldn't be the goal. Doing and focusing on what matters most should be. And today I am joined by Pam Thompson, the Development Director at Cystic Fibrosis of North Dakota. Pam, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're in my backyard, so a lot of kindred spirits happening here. So let's use that energy and let's dive into your background. Tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got into fundraising.
Sure. I always like to say no one really trains to go into fundraising. No one goes to school hoping to do that. As a matter of fact, I was an English major way back in the day. I thought I was going to teach middle school, which was dumb because there's no way I want to teach middle school. And then I basically spent the first 16, 18 years out of college being a mom. I was a stay-at-home mom. And then it was time for me to go back to work when my oldest was going to be going to college. This job actually was open, and I thought, hey, I could probably fundraise for a nonprofit. That was dumb also. You don't know what you don't know. And so everything I've learned has been through like on the job learning and failures and growth, and it's been an adventure. But I've been here almost 13 years now.
Yeah, that's amazing. So burnout is a real thing, and turnover is very high in the fundraising space. What's your magic sauce for sticking around for 13 years and still loving what you're doing?
Well, I mean, I'd be lying if I said I haven't rewritten my resume 20 times, um, because burnout is super real. But I think a real connection to the cause makes a difference. So the people we serve in the CF community with, people living with cystic fibrosis have become like family to me. I've gotten to know the people we serve, and that helps fuel my energy for fundraising. And then I've also just created some personal boundaries. I'm working on a shorter work week and work a little bit more remotely on Fridays. And that makes a huge difference. I noticed a lot less burnout when I worked with a shorter work week.
Good advice. So yeah, also the amount of hats that you wear, I would assume, is a lot as a
A
development
lot.
director. Can you share a little bit about what your role looks like?
Sure, we're a very small shop. I think we have 4 full-time employees. And one of those is a bookkeeper, which I love her, and I couldn't do her job, but she's also not a fundraiser or a communications person, and she would not be sad if I said that out loud. So I handle a lot of the communications, probably most of that. So I'm the communications person. I'm the event planner. I'm the fundraiser. And then I also have a lot of the program services, working with our people with CF. So I'm juggling a lot of hats.
Yeah, for sure. How do you decide what to focus on and what gets priority each week? Do you have a system
Right.
in place for that?
I think that comes from the fact that I have 6 children, so I've always worn a lot of hats. And so you learn when you're raising a bunch of kids that the loudest one gets the most attention first. And that is no different than working in my office. So whatever needs the highest level of attention is what gets it right now. Um, so currently we're planning for the Turkey Trot. It's our biggest fundraiser that happens Thanksgiving Day. So that is top of my list right now. So anything Trot related gets bumped to the top. Anything else gets bumped to the bottom, and I get there. And then there's times I'm just overwhelmed. I'm like, there's just too much to do. I don't know where to start. And then I just pull out like a notebook and a pen and just start brain dumping a list of all the things I need to do. And then I do the easiest ones first. So,
That's fantastic. Yeah, that was early on in my career too. That's what I did, was write down everything that I should feel like I should be doing, and then you number those in priority, and then you put the top three on the top, and that's what you work on.
yeah. And yeah, and then I just work through that list, and sadly there are things that like end up on that list that get moved to the next list over and over and over again. And then you have to decide, is that something that I need to delegate to someone else? Is that something that maybe obviously I'm not finding it as a priority. Is it something that can be a priority for someone else? Or is it something that doesn't necessarily need to happen? Like, is that something that just needs to be cut?
And letting go of it.
Just let it go.
Yeah. Let's talk. So you talked about Turkey Trot. So we're in the end of the year sprint here. Um, as we move into the next year, what are you thinking about to start the year off well and end this year well to
Sure.
jumpstart next year?
Sure. Turkey Trot kind of mixes in with my year-end fundraising. It kind of is a natural push. Um, there's a lot of fundraising that goes on with it. There's people who just come out to run the race, and that's fantastic. I love that. I've worked really hard at connecting people who come out just to run the race with our event, with our cause, and let them know that they're running, and that's wonderful, but they're also running for something bigger. And so I've started, rather than a real formal year-end push, I kind of target our participants of that event and do some education through the end of November into the end of December, and hopefully capture them as supporters and donors. And so that's a real, it's something I've added probably in the last 3 or 4 years. I think for a long time I just took for granted that we just raised a lot of money with some runners. And now I want them to be part of our team too, and have to care about CF as much as we do.
So then how do you pull those into your next year, like donor segmentation and donor management, stewarding those
Sure,
well? What does that look like
sure.
for you?
On DonorDock, they get their very own tag. They're my Turkey Trot participants. And I've put them into their very own email sequence. And my goal is to get them into some of my other journeys. I'd like them to, then make it into my first time giver journey, my second time, ideally mid-level giver journey, right? But I do start with them, and they have their very own segmentation, and I I'm writing directly to them as participants of this event, and that they were part of something bigger than they even thought.
With building donor relationships, the last thing we want to do is treat our major donors like we would treat our first time donors. They should have a different
Right.
journey. You use the word journey.
Absolutely.
How do you approach this donor management? Are you a type A person with everything in its place, or are you a more of a devil may care approach?
I'm probably in between. I I'm married to a type A person, so I've become more type A over the years. Um, and it is nice to have those tools in place, because you don't want to treat every donor the same, because they're not all the same. And I think they all have different, um, they have, I mean, you can talk about love languages with any other relationship. I think donors have their own love languages too. There are some that it's very important that their name ends up in our newsletter, and if it gets left off, they're going to be very upset. How did I not end up in there? I see all these other names. Where was I? There's others who are like, oh, I'd rather not have my name published. I just want to do, whatever. And some want a heartfelt letter, some want a phone call. you know it you get to learn that as you go. There's some that you call and they're like, oh, that was great, thanks for calling me, but you don't have to spend the time to do that again. I've had some donors who say, please, like, if you send me one thank you a year, that's great, but you don't need to spend time every month doing that. um, so you just learn, and you make notations, and you try and meet people where they're at.
Sure. Practically, what is that? How does that look for you? How do you keep track of all of those things? Because as your donor base grows, you can only keep track of, Dunbar's
Right.
law says what, 50 relationships. And so beyond
Right.
that, how do you make sure that you know who's wants an email, who wants to have their name in the newsletter, all of that?
I've worked really hard at keeping notes within my donor doc. Like, that has been huge for me. When I inherited this job, I had no, like, I had a CRM, I had donors, but I had no idea why they started giving, who they're related to. You know, those things matter. Like, knowing that someone is someone's uncle makes a difference in how you communicate with them, that they're not a stranger, they're not this. So I keep really pretty detailed notes, and I've gotten as I've gone on, I've kept more, because I think if I were ever to not have this job and someone were to walk in and inherit my donor list, they'd wanna know these things that I had to spend a lot of time feeling like an unpaid FBI agent trying to figure out, you know?
Applaud you for that. Oftentimes CRMs can be treated as just that, where it's if I disappear tomorrow, somebody has to take my place. So here's a bunch of notes as like this repository. But to be able to utilize them and segment well because of that and communicate on the right communication channels because of it, that's huge.
And it takes a little extra time, and I'm not
Right.
100%, but I'm working towards knowing that I have all those things there instead of half in a notebook here and some in my phone and some, you know, I really
So a question for you, going back to the burnout side of things, what is a piece of advice you'd give to a fellow fundraiser who is feeling that burnout and wondering if they want to keep going?
yeah. Um, I think to have someone else that you can talk to that has a job similar to yours, that you can just go and have coffee and say, "This is driving me nuts. I don't feel like I'm being heard. I feel like everyone's the weight of the whole organization feels like it's on my shoulders. If this event doesn't go right, if we aren't able to meet our goals for the year, you know, it can feel very heavy at times, but to have someone else to talk to and know that they too sometimes feel that heaviness and to be able to step back and say, it's not just me, and also to know that, yes, while the work we do is extremely, extremely important, it's generally not life and death. Like it feels like it, but generally it's not life and death. And we're gonna we're gonna have the same market fluctuations anyone else does in any other professions, and that not every day is an up day. Um, and some things just flop. That's just how it is.
Yeah, and I think that's even more important in today's economy or just where we're at in our society right now of there's a lot of unease and uncertainty of what the economy is going to look like. And so making sure that we prioritize relationships over how much money or how much we're impacting, I think that's going to be what brings us longevity. Would you agree with that?
I 100% agree. Um, I always say a major gift does not happen just because I've written a letter asking for a bunch of money. Like that's not how that happens. There's 100 steps in between, like someone's $25 donation on Giving Hearts Day leading to a major gift. Like, it's not just, I gave you $25 and then I said thank you, and you said, "Oh, great, you thanked me for that, and now here's 10,000." I mean, I wish, like, my job would be a lot easier if that's what happened, but it doesn't. So,
What does that look like for you? Do you have a practice in place of nurturing those well?
I love thanking donors, so that's one of my favorite things to do is just and I'm a shameless user of the action board, and when I feel overwhelmed and say I just don't know even where to start today, sometimes that's just where I go. And then it's like, well, John just gave his second gift. Maybe you should send him a thank you note. I'm like, sounds like a great place to start today, right? And and from there you can say, oh, and then Carol should probably have a call. And you're like, oh, I guess I'm gonna call Carol. And so when you're overwhelmed, sometimes just having that little nudge to say, "It's time to do that." Like, you can move on from there. So,
Yeah, that's good advice. Because it comes back to, for those that might not work inside a donor doc, it comes back to prioritizing. So it might be a piece of
right.
paper. Write down the
Yeah,
priorities, write down your donors, pull a report to see
yeah,
who's given most recently something, right?
right. And sometimes it's just a matter of like, wow, when you pull one of those reports of your donors, and you say, "Oh, I haven't even heard from Joe Smith for 8 months, and he used to give every month." what happened. That phone call could be very enlightening. There could have just been, a banking issue, like, oh, our bank changed hands and I just didn't get things switched over. Or, you know what? I lost my wife. It's been a tough time, and we can walk through those things together. But no one wants to feel ignored or forgotten. And so sometimes it feels awkward. You're like, well, gosh, I haven't heard from John Smith in 8 months. Maybe he just doesn't like us anymore. You might find out it's something much deeper than that. And you can then build a deeper relationship that way too.
That's so good. Okay, Pam, I always end with one final question. I try to make it really tactical.
Okay.
What is one thing that every fundraiser should do today that you believe matters most?
Pick up your phone. Pick up your phone, call someone. That was the scariest thing to me when I started because, I'm a shameless Gen Xer, and yes, I used to be attached to a phone that was to the wall, and I would spend hours and hours on it, and then all of a sudden, we have a phone, and it's not for that anymore. I have a friend who says, I don't use my phone for that, and so it's scary to call someone, but here's the thing. You probably aren't gonna talk to the person anyway. You're gonna leave a voicemail, and that voicemail can make a real impression. So pick up the phone. You don't know whose life you're going to just brighten their day with a quick thank you, or I was thinking about you, or have you remembered that our event's coming up and we'd love to have you there. That can make a real difference in someone's life.
That's so huge, and we hear that time and time again. Pick up the phone. It's the number one way to build momentum, and it's oftentimes the scariest. But
Yeah,
it shouldn't be. It
it
really
shouldn't
shouldn't
be.
be.
It shouldn't be, but it can be terrifying. You're like, no, anything but call.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. I'm a shameless millennial that doesn't use my phone for calling, so I understand that. But
Yeah.
it shouldn't be. It should be
No,
the number one thing that you do as
no, I
fundraisers.
mean, I hate calling to order pizza. I'd rather just, there's an app for that.
Yeah. Well, Pam, thank you so much for joining today
Thank you
and for
so
giving
much.
freely of your advice. You were fantastic.
Excellent. Well, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks so much for
Awesome.
having me.
Well, for those that are listening, I hope that this conversation has encouraged you to simplify, to focus, and to lean into the ruthless elimination of doing more, but focusing on what matters most. If you are curious about how DonorDock can help you find clarity and build a strong donor base, you can visit us at DonorDock.com. And we will see you next week.